Okay, so we're going to begin. Hello and welcome to our Business Analytics webinar on innovative teaching methods in a remote delivery world. We're hosting this webinar because we found that the need to make sound, profitable decisions with business analytics is in demand now more than ever. From what we're learning, this is one of the top reasons why business analytics programs are popping up on campuses right across Canada. We hope you will enjoy today's session, leaving with tangible takeaways to kickstart your business analytics course this fall. First, I'd like to do some introductions. My name is Laura Gergley, Marketing Manager with McGraw Hill Canada for all things business analytics. Today, I'm joined with my colleague and product manager in all things business analytics, Mark Grzkowiak. Before we go over today's agenda, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. As you log in, all participants will be on mute. Please use the chat box or Q&A to type any questions for the presenters. We will be recording this webinar in full, and if you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please use the Q&A to chat with the host, or we recommend that if you're having audio issues, do call in with the landline number and access code that appears on the bottom of this slide. So now I'm going to actually take us into today's agenda. We will kickstart today's webinar with a panel discussion from our business analytics author team, who will share their success in innovative methods for teaching business analytics. Then we will move to Janet Fraser, a professor from Western Virginia University, who will discuss how she incorporates business analytics across the business curriculum, specifically speaking to the success she's had with online teaching and the digital tools she's found most engaging. We will then be joined by a member from industry, Francis Silva, who is Vice President of Data Analytics at Bond Brand Loyalty in Canada, who will provide his insights to career readiness and employability skills that he looks for while recruiting top talent. Lastly, we will host a panel discussion with all 6 guests, where our panelists will take questions from the audience. So please be sure to save your questions for the end and ask them in the chat box. So now I'm actually going to ask Jen if you could actually pass the presenter ball over to our Jaggia author team, who is Kevin.
Done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Let me start with our PowerPoint slide, and Professor Leida Chen will start off our presentation today. Okay, Leida.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kevin. Good morning. Thank you for attending our presentation. As Laura mentioned, in this presentation, we are going to discuss how we infuse the CRISP-PM framework in teaching business analytics to provide students with a comprehensive view of the analytics process and an experiential learning experience. So there are many different versions of the definition out there for business analytics. And the version of the definition that we subscribe to when teaching this subject is that business analytics is the scientific process of transforming data into insights for the purpose of making better decisions. Over the last few years, many universities have created new courses and programs to provide analytics education to students. However, we are also seeing some serious limitations in how these courses are being implemented. First, most of these analytics courses are still being taught in the same way that business statistics courses are being traditionally taught, which is to focus heavily on the modeling phase without providing students with a comprehensive understanding of the entire process of going from data to insights as described in the definition of business analytics. And second, most of the analytics programs tend to emphasize technical skill sets such as coding, programming, but often overlook some other important aspects such as problem formulation and storytelling. As a result, students are often ill-equipped to deal with real-life data and analytics projects. So through our experience teaching analytics over many years, we found that experiential learning approach to be the most effective for applied and complex subjects such as business analytics. And to provide students with more structure in their learning experience, we also decided to infuse a widely accepted industry standard called the CRISP-DM in our pedagogy. Next slide, please. So what is CRISP-DM? So CRISP-DM stands for Cross-Industry Standard Process for Data Mining. It was created jointly by 6 companies in the analytics space to help project teams navigate through complex data mining projects. As the diagram in this slide shows, CRISP-DM is an iterative process that includes 6 phases. And to make CRISP-DM more conducive to the educational setting, we have developed specific learning objectives for each phase. The process starts with business understanding, which identifies key business questions to ask that might lead to actionable business strategies. And this is followed by the data understanding phase, which requires students to understand the data from the business perspective through the use of summary statistics and visualization. Then the data preparation phase is a technical phase where students will develop a comprehensive plan for data wrangling, cleaning, reduction, and transformation to prepare the data for subsequent analysis. That's followed by modeling phase, which is usually where the fun is. Students will develop various descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive models to assess model performance. And during the evaluation phase, the students will put on their business hats again to evaluate whether their analysis has achieved the business objectives or not. So finally, because the actual deployment of the strategy would be difficult in an educational setting, we usually ask students to focus on developing storytelling skills to communicate the findings to stakeholders or decision makers using non-technical language and through enticing data visualization. So as you can see, the business analytics process is not a trivial process. It requires a wide range of technical and non-technical skills, and also requires the analyst to switch back and forth between wearing the business hat and the technical hat multiple times throughout the process. So to gain a good understanding of the analytics process, students must understand the interplay between the phases and also the iterative nature of the CRISP-DM process. So after the webinar, Laura will distribute a teaching paper that we wrote about a term-long class project that incorporates the CRISP-DM process. We found the process to be very valuable in terms of helping enhance student learning and knowledge retention. And this approach not only can be used to structure a complex analytics project, but can also be used to structure an entire course on business analytics. Next slide, please. So in our textbook, Business Analytics Communicating with Numbers, we have fully incorporated the key features of the CRISP-DM process to help enhance teaching and learning. This slide shows how the book content corresponds to the phases of CRISP-DM. For example, we have an introductory chapter that discusses the business applications of analytics and how to formulate the business questions and objectives. Each chapter also comes with an introductory case, and a big data case at the end of the chapter that present real life business problems and how to formulate analytics questions to help solve these problems. We have 2 chapters that are dedicated to data understanding and data preparation. We have a wonderful chapter on data wrangling techniques which in our view is one of the most important skill sets in business analytics, but is often overlooked by other textbooks out there. And for modeling, we have 7 chapters that are dedicated to various predictive and prescriptive techniques. And among them, we have 4 chapters dedicated to data mining techniques. As I mentioned earlier, all chapters come with the introductory case and end of chapter big data case to illustrate how business analytics are used to meet the objectives of the business. So all these cases come with synopsis and sample reports that demonstrate how analytics findings can be communicated to decision makers in an engaging and a non-technical manner through storytelling. So next, I'm going to hand over to Alison to delve deeper into some of these key features in our book.
Thank you, Leida. Hello, this is Alison Kelly, and I will highlight some of the important features of the business analytics text. As Leida mentioned, throughout our text, we emphasize communicating and storytelling in every chapter. First, every chapter opens with a relatable case. We thread this case throughout the chapter, and after we answer the questions from the case, we provide a short written report, say a paragraph or 2, which we call a synopsis. And here we communicate the findings in layman's terms. The second way we emphasize communication and storytelling is with our Writing with Big Data section. And here we use one of the big data sets that we have compiled to analyze a different business problem. Our write-up is a bit longer, say 2 pages or so. We have found that it is important for students to see how to correctly present tables and graphs, as well as just presenting the answers to the business problems in non-technical terms. Next slide, please. This is our introductory case in chapter 9, which is on supervised data mining. And it deals with the manager of a gym who has just hosted an open house for potential members. The manager wants to develop a data-driven strategy for selecting which new open house attendees she should contact. So this is what you see on the left-hand side of the slide. And on the top right side, we show relevant output from the case. And on the bottom right, you'll see what I just had mentioned is the synopsis, right? So it's just a 2-paragraph summary of what we have found with the particular business problem in this case, as who should the manager contact, who is most likely to join this gym. Next slide, please. For each technique, we supply both Excel and sometimes with the add-in analytic solver, as well as R instructions. We selected these software because of reviewer feedback. In addition to the instructions within each chapter, we also provide 2 appendices, one getting started with Excel and the other getting started with R. We have found that Analytic Solver works well with Excel, and R is open source and people are asking for it. Next slide, please. As Leida mentioned, we have a dedicated chapter on data wrangling. We start with an overview of the key concepts related to data management, but the majority of the chapter is devoted to converting data into a more useful form. Here we talk about binning and subsetting data, how to treat missing values and outliers, how to transform numerical variables into categorical variables or using mathematical transformations, how to transform categorical variables using category reduction, dummy variables, or creating category scores. Next slide, please. For instance, this is our first example in the data wrangling chapter, and it deals with a company that matches independent workers for short-term engagements. We first examine missing observations, then we use counting and sorting rules in Excel and R to extract useful information from the data. such as how many of these employees work in the automotive industry? How many earn more than $30 an hour? How many are in the automotive industry and earn $30 an hour? Next slide, please. In addition to 2 chapters on linear and logistic regression, plus a chapter on forecasting, we have 4 exclusive chapters on data mining. In chapter 8 is our introduction to data mining. Chapters 9 and 10 are on supervised data mining, and chapter 11 is on unsupervised data mining. We also learned from our statistics text that we needed to develop ancillaries, especially Connect, which is McGraw-Hill's online homework management system, as we were writing the text, not as an afterthought. We have provided templates for each Connect exercise to the developers. We have also provided guidance with tolerances and rounding rules. We would also like to note that this text was built from the ground up. We resisted the temptation to simply append a chapter or 2 of data mining to our statistics text. In this process, we were able to listen to feedback from over 700 reviewers. Next slide, please. We have found from listening to these reviewers that business analytics is taught in a number of different ways. And for this reason, this slide, we have suggested a number of different ways that you might want to use the text. We have found that it's very usable as a one-term textbook in terms of having just, if you wanted to have a business statistics course with some analytics introduced, or if you want to teach a more holistic approach to business analytics, it's very much, you can very much use it in a 2-term course. And we've also found that it's applicable for undergraduates as well as graduate courses. So I'm going to hand it over now to one of my co-authors, Kevin, who is using the text right now in his online course.
Thank you, Alison. Leida and I have been using our textbook to teach an online business analytics course for undergraduate students this quarter. And this current course is based on the holistic approach to business analytics that you see on the slide here. And our other co-author, Sanjiv Jaggia, is also developing a similar online course for the summer quarter that follows the business statistics with analytics flavor for graduate students. But we are following the same pedagogical methodology for both courses. And in the next few slides, I'll go over several things that have worked well for us this quarter. And we'll be more than happy to share any course materials that you might be interested in. So if you would like us to share with you anything that we are showing you today, please contact Laura from McGraw Hill. Like what I mentioned earlier, the current course we are teaching right now follows the holistic approach to analytics. And the online course that we have is set up on Canvas, and it has both asynchronous and synchronous components. And students are required to read the chapter and watch pre-recorded videos or pre-recorded lectures, and then complete a quiz before each synchronous Zoom meeting that we hold once or twice a week. And let me show you just a quick example of how we set up our course on Canvas. So we have a number of milestones that students need to meet, and their expectations for students to read the chapter and also review documents and also watch the recorded videos ahead of time. And then before they attend the Zoom meetings each week, they are supposed to complete a quiz. And then these quizzes become part of their final grade. And earlier, Alison showed you that we have an example in our book where we provided detailed software instruction for every example. And because of that, students can go over the example in the book and along with our recorded lectures before joining the Zoom meeting. And so during the Zoom meeting, I can spend more time coaching them and troubleshooting whatever issues that might arise. So instead of repeating the lecture, I can spend more time getting deeper into the analysis and results. And also because the interpretation of the analysis and the results is also provided in the book, oftentimes during my Zoom meetings with the students, we were able to go deeper into the cases and have more meaningful discussion as a group. And for the asynchronous components for our online course, we mostly use the tools provided by McGraw. And these include electronic book or smart book. And McGraw also has a mobile app called Read Anywhere that allows students to read the electronic book on their phone. And we also developed exercise problems on Connect. And I'll talk more about the Connect problems in a few minutes. And as I mentioned earlier, Leida and I also recorded video lectures based on the chapters and examples in our textbook. So here, let me show you a few examples of these recorded lectures that we use. This is a follow-up on the case that Alison mentioned earlier, where we have a company that has a number of part-time workers, and we are trying to demonstrate some data wrangling example to students to find out how many employees are in the automotive industry and how many employees make more than $30 an hour. And we show students how to do this both in Excel and in R. So let me show you two short video clips here.
Now let's look at how we can count the number of employees in each industry. In order to do that, we need to use the COUNT-IF function because we are introducing a criteria to the count function. So if we want to find out how many employees work in the automotive industry, what we can do is find the empty cell, enter the function equal to count if, open parenthesis, enter the range of cells with the value for the industry, which is C2 to C605, comma, and then you enter the criteria within double quotes, equal to automotive, double quote, close parenthesis, and press enter. This gives you the answer 190. So this shows that out of the 604 employees, 190 of them worked in the automotive industry.
And the next video clip, Leida shows students how to do the same thing, but now using the R code.
Now, to count the number of employees who worked in the automotive industry, or the employees who earned more than $30 per hour, we can use the same strategy. We can use the function length, and then the function which. And for the which function, we are going to put in my data $industry equal, but this time we are putting a double equal sign, which is also called the equality operator. And this is used to check whether the industry is automotive or not. Okay. So, and the single quote, automotive. When I run this script, this will show me that 190 employees work in the automotive industry. So if I want to find out how many companies who are paid more than $30 an hour, I can use the same strategy, length, which my data $sign, and hourly wage. And in this case, I'm using the greater than sign, greater than 30. Okay, and I don't need to use the single quote because the wage is a number field. I only need to use the single quote when I have a text field that I want to compare it to. So if I run this script, I should have the result 536. If I want to...
And I also want to point out that all the data sets and computer instructions for our textbook are available online on McGraw-Hill's website. And the instructors can make them available to students as well as additional resources. And again, my co-authors and I are more than happy to share any of these course materials with you. So one of the things I like about McGraw-Hill's online feature is that it has many options that allow me to control the homework assignments. I can set a limit on how much time the students have in order to complete the homework and how many attempts they can try, and whether or not we would want to take point off or point reduction for each attempt. And in the end, I can run a report to see how each student is doing and how well each assignment is assessing these students. So it's a nice set of tools to make life a lot easier for us as instructors. And let me follow up on what Alison mentioned about McGraw-Hill's Connect. We work closely with McGraw-Hill to develop these online exercise problems on Connect. And all of our exercise problems were developed from scratch since the beginning with Connect in mind. For example, because we know that there are differences between analytic solver in Excel and R. So whenever appropriate, we create two separate questions, one for Excel and one for R. And like Alison mentioned, that sometimes students do the homework and they might do the routing in the calculation results or intermediate steps differently from what we anticipate. So we built into the system where if the students did the routing of the numbers slightly different, we have upper and lower limits so that students still get their answer graded correctly. So those are the types of things that we thought about ahead of time to help make things easier for instructors. And McGraw-Hill also has a type of assignments that is called algorithmic exercises. This is where students or each student will get a different version of the same exercise problem. And these different versions may have slightly different data sets, a different cutoff values, or some differences in other parameters, so that the answer would be different from one version to another. And this really helps to reduce the cheating and incidents with academic dishonesty. So these are some of the things that we have worked and used for our online course this quarter. And I thought that it might be helpful to share with everyone here because it has worked well for us. Hopefully it can work well for other people as well. And so that concludes this portion of our presentation. And like what Laura mentioned, if you have any questions or comments or any suggestions, please feel free to send them through the chat room. And I believe that McGraw has set aside some time at the end that we can answer these questions after all the 3 presentations are concluded. And I'm going to turn the time back over to Laura from McGraw-Hill to introduce the next presenter.
Thank you very much to our Jaggia author team for taking us through the ins and outs of your business analytics 1E title. You did touch a little bit on how you are already incorporating your business analytics title in a remote delivery world. So to continue that momentum and to take a deeper dive, our next slide, our next presenter and item on our agenda is with Janet Fraser. She will be going over how to incorporate analytics across the business curriculum in a remote delivery world. Janet Fraser is a professor from Western Virginia University who will discuss how she incorporates analytics across the business curriculum, specifically speaking to the success she's had with online teaching and the digital tools she's found most engaging. So Janet, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Laura. Hi, everyone. Like Laura introduced, I'm Janet Fraser. I'm a teaching assistant professor at West Virginia University, where I coordinate our business data analytics programs. I'm also a digital faculty consultant for McGraw-Hill. I'm super thrilled to present to a Canadian audience because for me, Vancouver's home, though West Virginia is a beautiful twist along the road of life. I started using business analytics before the COVID-19 outbreak, but since then, I've been really, really happy that I've made that choice. So there are some universities like UBC, Simon Fraser, and UVic that have already announced all online fall terms. I know the University of California system has as well, and others are leaning towards this hybrid online face-to-face approach, where about 25% of courses are offered face-to-face, and then the balance are offered online or partially online. And well, in higher ed, we've never really had to be so agile before, and the environment is completely riddled with uncertainty and apprehension, and that's not just from us and our colleagues, but our students are also a little unsure about what the best path forward is. But here we are, and our only option is to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and that means that having really great online tools and tools that support online learning, more important than ever. So I primarily use business analytics in 3 courses that we have. I use it for the course at the heart of our undergraduate minor, which is Buddha 450, Business Data Mining and Visualization. The way that we organize our business data analytics programs at the undergraduate level at West Virginia is we have a minor, and we encourage all of our business students, whether they're in finance, econ, marketing, management, HR, any business major you please. We encourage them to add a minor. We have several minors. We have data analytics, we have cybersecurity, and that's how we integrate data analytics across the entire business curriculum. We package it in a way that it can snap into every one of the specific disciplines. And the course that is the heart of that is Buddha 450, where we use this text. And then we also use it in our MBA program. We use it with our on-campus MBA students in BADM 556, Data Analytics for Management. And then I also use it with our online healthcare MBA students, where we sort of have one class to introduce traditional business statistics as well as business analytics. And that ties into sort of the flexibility and capabilities that this text has in being able to fit not only undergrad and graduate students, but also be a good fit across the business curriculum. So, like I said, the text is very flexible and you can use it to support a number of different applications. This is my typical approach when I want to introduce the fundamentals of analytics, but I know that I need to do a little bit of business statistics remediation. And that's a pretty common need, both at the undergraduate and at the MBA level, where I need to do a little bit of both in one class. And then I'll send them on, if they're minors, to classes that get into specific applications of data mining. I add in chapter 8 and chapter 10 about data mining just to kind of as a teaser to introduce students to some of the more advanced and complex concepts. Chapter 8, which is the intro to data mining, is a wonderful introduction. And there are a number of other chapters you could choose to sort of build onto that teaser. I really like using decision trees, and we found them to have a lot of really good applications in a lot of the research that I've been doing recently. So I include chapter 10 sort of as a specific application of data mining that I'm excited about. So that could be replaced by something at the instructor's discretion. Maybe if there's a topic of data mining that you find very, very engaging, I find that is a very good way to get students excited about where they're going next. So this is my approach for a little bit of business statistics remediation and the fundamentals of analytics to give my undergrads and my MBA students a perfect foundation for either making decisions in business or moving on to more advanced classes in their minor. So there are 5 reasons why I absolutely love this text and the supporting platform, McGraw-Hill's Connect. And they are that I have flexibility in my software choice. My undergraduate data analytics minors are a lot more enthusiastic about R than my MBA students tend to be, and that's fine. They're generally a different type of student. I love the different types of tools I have for developing and customizing assignments. There are great opportunities to access and interface with the textbook. There are lots of ways that I can gather information about my students' use of the online resources, which can help me sort of tune my lectures and the things that I emphasize further on in the class. And then the tools that McGraw-Hill has to offer through the Connect platform are very, very nicely integrated to a lot of different learning management systems. As we saw in the previous presentation with Canvas, I use Blackboard or eCampus at West Virginia, and it also integrates really, really nicely into that. And I'll get into each one of these passion points in a little more depth. So with software choice, all of the material in the text, when at all possible, is explained using Excel with or without Analytics Solver and R. And now there's actually even a Python supplement that's in development. So again, you can really tailor it towards where your students are and what their interests are. Our MBA students get it very enthusiastically explained to them that they should come out of the program as Excel experts. So I may emphasize that more with them, whereas I emphasize R more with my undergraduate data analytics minors. But this is an example where you are calculating Poisson probabilities, and it explains exactly how to do it in Excel and exactly how to do it using R. And one of the things that I especially like is that you can see how both generate the same answer. So I often teach this, especially for students who are a little more anxious about using R and developing those coding skills. I tell them to learn the skill conceptually and theoretically using Excel, and then use R to check your work. And that gives them some practice, but they still feel pretty good that they understand the concept. So then they can move on to developing that practice using R. And I found that to be especially helpful with my MBA students. My MBA students sometimes give me a lot of grief while they're learning a little bit about R and doing a little bit of coding in my classes. And that's usually because it's the first time they've ever done any kind of coding ever. But by the end of it, they tend to feel pretty special because There are not a lot of MBA programs that are teaching even just basic scripting in R. So they end up feeling like they have an additional skill that gives them a competitive edge compared to other MBA graduates. And well, that's always really happy and rewarding feedback for me to hear from my students. So whether you're working with the exercises in the back of the chapters or looking at the test banks, there are these algo or algorithmic problems. And again, that was touched on a little bit in the previous presentation, but what these are problems that generate different versions of themselves for each student. So while the specific skill remains the same for every student, the specific values differ. So this is an example of an algorithmic question, and we have a table with a little bit of data in it. And if I reloaded this question, or if I had a student open this question up in an assignment, it would not look the same as it looks for me. Those values would change a little bit. And then those differences are automatically accounted for in the table where students will enter in the specific numerical values. I find that the questions are very good at explaining to students how many decimal places they should be rounding their final answers to, but it still sometimes proves to be a little bit of an issue. So having a little bit of forgiveness too in terms of the rounding is very, very helpful. It's not that my students don't know how to round, it's just that sometimes in the excitement of doing their homework, they miss the bold red print that says round your final answers to 2 decimal places. So they may just start by entering in those values and not paying attention to rounding and things like that. But there is some forgiveness built into the system that automatic grades it. You're not going to see a sea of red if they are off by a 100th of a value. And I call these my cheat-proof questions because if a student copies off of another student, well, their answers are wrong. If they copy the method, they generally have to do the problem twice. First with the student helper's numbers, but then they have to do it again with their own numbers, which means they've actually done more work and not less work. And I'm not sure they realize that, but I always get a little bit of a chuckle out of it. It's also very nice that you can reword questions as well as creating and adding your own questions if you're concerned about students searching the web with their question text. I know sometimes I tell my students to look things up online and they act like they've never seen a search engine before, but when they have a homework assignment, I know the question text is going straight into Google. So there are capabilities to do that. And if you add some of your own questions, it's fairly straightforward to do. They format very, very similarly to the questions that are provided in the different banks. I know I like to give them my students my own messy data to play with on tests. So I'll create my own sort of file attachment question where I give them a really, really messy Excel spreadsheet and tell them to make the best of it. And we see how that goes. And as an instructor, if you create your own question and you include it in an assignment that you're building on the McGraw-Hill platform, the IP does stay with you, which was a concern that I had originally, but was explained that all of my messy data sets that I like to have my students work on that I developed do remain as mine. So the textbook is available in a few different formats and students can do the readings in a few different formats. And I think that's been really, really helpful, especially since we've moved online where not all students are able to attend synchronous sessions with me, or maybe the pre-recorded lectures that I've done or some of the resources that the authors have provided may not be the right fit for students. We have options. So the textbook is available as a smart book, which includes questions to help students practice and think about the concepts while they're engaged with the readings. And you can even set these up as assignments. I usually make the Smart Book reading an assignment worth a very small amount of extra credit. And I do this because when the students use the Smart Book activities, the system collects data about how confident students feel about their answer. So when they answer one of these questions in the Smart Book exercises, not only do they provide the answer, but when they submit it, they have to identify how confident they feel about their answer. So do they know it? Are they super confident? Are they fairly confident? Are they more unsure than sure? Or is it a wild guess? And that information is reported back so I can see where students' pain points are. The other really helpful presentation of the text is the McGraw-Hill Read Anywhere app. And I've had students tell me that they use this app to treat the textbook as an audiobook, and they'll like go to the gym and they'll listen to the audiobook. And while I've never found this content to be terribly motivating during an intense cardio session, whatever works for my students is what works for me. So I have been really, really happy and thrilled with the different ways in which students can complete and interact with the different content. And I confess that I'm just a little bit jealous. I kind of wish I had the Smart Book when I was an undergraduate student. As I mentioned with the Smart Book exercises, data is tracked, and then I can pull it in a report to see what my students are struggling with. There are reports that will slice and dice data about assignments, about readings, about student performance, anything you can imagine. There is a report for that you can pull using the Connect function. So this is a homework assignment I had my MBA students do this past spring. I had 38 students in my class, and I can see the 38 students submitted their assignment. And I can see general summary information about how well students did on each question, on each attempt. So I give my students 2 attempts, and usually their first attempt is the one they want to submit for credit, and their second attempt I find is usually sort of their sandbox where they play with things to kind of figure out what they're doing, and then they'll take what they learned from that one sort of draft attempt and submit the other, which is why the first attempt is substantially better than the last. And then also I can see the average for the best assignment attempt. So that is very helpful. If I were to click on the plus symbols, I could actually see how each student performed on each question. But for the purposes of this presentation, I figured a nice summary would probably do the trick. So I can specifically see here which questions students struggled with, and each one of those questions has a number of attributes related to it: learning objectives, AACSB, categories, Bloom's taxonomy. So I can use a lot of those different approaches to generally evaluate and understand where my students are with the different concepts in the class. And like I said, especially teaching online, that has been enormously helpful in tuning additional resources that I post to make available or add practice for my students to work with in the online platform. And the 5th thing that I absolutely love about using this text and using it in conjunction with the Connect platform is the learning management system integration. So my students can access their materials in their courses either through McGraw-Hill Connect directly, or when they're logged into the learning management system that my university uses, they can access all of the assignments and readings and things as well. So this is what one of my students' screens would look like if they logged in through Connect, and all of the assignments are listed, including the final exam, which had to be delivered online. And then there's also information about the course materials where they can get access to the Smart Book readings, as well as just a link to the standard ebook for the text. So that's what it would look like if they use the McGraw-Hill platform to directly access the course. And then if my students want to access through the Blackboard eCampus LMS we use at West Virginia University, they can do that as well. So here we can see the assignments are still lined up. They can get access to them from here, as well as access to other course materials, and then easy access to the other classes they may be taking at the same time. So some students like going into Connect directly, others prefer accessing it through the LMS, but it's really easy to enable it so they can go into it either way. So I found this text helps me go further and go further faster than other approaches to teaching this material. I've taught in our business data analytics minor since the very, very beginning about 2 years ago. And I started using materials that I developed myself for different classes, and I kind of pulled things together, and it worked. But I found that since you business analytics text, I can get past linear regression and logistic regression, and now I can get into more specific types of regression analysis. I can get into time series, and I can also start taking them into data mining, which conceptually is a direction that more and more of these students are going to need to be well versed in as they move forward. So while my prior system worked out just fine, I can go farther and I can get there faster using these resources. And even in scenarios where I haven't been able to cover every single chapter in the text, I found it to be a very valuable reference material for students. If they're working on final group projects, or my MBA students do an experiential project, they've been able to go back and use this text as a reference. For example, I had to skip over the time series chapter when I taught this class in the spring to my MBA students, but one of the teams really needed that content for their experiential project, and they were able to pick up the text and really fairly intuitively and easily pick it up. They found the presentation of the concepts and the problems to be very, very intuitive. So it'll get you further and faster. And I welcome questions at the end of the session today. Laura?
Janet, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I really loved your ability to go deep into the platform, into the text, and really highlight the ways in which students are finding success with this content solutions and material as we go forward. So next up on our agenda, we're going to dive a little bit deeper and see how these students are actually taking the courses that they're learning and applying them to industry. So I'm going to introduce our next guest on our agenda. We'll be joined by Francis Silva, who is Vice President of Data and Analytics at Bond Brand Loyalty in Canada. He'll go over and will provide insights to career readiness and employability skills that he's looking for while recruiting top talent. So, Francis, over to you.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. Good afternoon again. I'll be talking to you about connecting students with industry expectations and employable skills. So what you've heard prior to this was obviously the great text that the team has provided and some of the ways they've used it. I just want to give a brief intro into how we actually recruit and what we're looking for, as well as the types of roles that we recruit for. So just quickly about my background. For those of you familiar with a lot of these brands in Canada, I've worked with Loblaw, Shoppers Drug Mart, Canadian Tire, and Loyalty One. And currently I'm at a company called Bond Brand Loyalty, where I lead our data and analytics practice. You'd be familiar with us if you've ever used a CIBC Aventura rewards program or the Scotiabank Scene program or the Ford Pass rewards. Those are some of the programs we operate here in Canada. And really, as I've gone through my career, I've had to recruit for many different types of analytics talent, specifically building up analytics practices. And now, as we've evolved, and it's now 2020, the types of roles that we're recruiting for specifically have started to evolve. And so there's some specificity in those roles, which I'm going to get to in the next slide, which is these key areas. So when I think about the analytics practices, and at least mine today, and we're a practice of about 50 analytics practitioners across these domains, there's 5 key areas we look for. The first is client analytics. Client analytics is similar to what the name suggests, is these folks are actually working with the client directly or the client services team, so the people who interact with our business. So these are the interpreters. We consider them the last mile of analytics delivery, and they're responsible for those deliverables back to the client. So as when you talk about business analytics and think about how do you actually take this problem, and once you've gone and solved the problem, how do you then deliver the answer and the recommendation back to your business? This would be that group. Typical roles we hire for in this area are data analyst or business analyst. And you can see some of their key skills there as well. The next group that we hire for is strategic analytics. And so similar to client analytics, where these people are business facing, these are more, if you think about those MBA students who are using analytics packages, this is more consulting-esque. So usually our strategic analytics group works on consulting engagements, specifically marketing and loyalty consulting engagements, but they need analytic skills to be able to complete their consulting engagement. So think about doing segmentation or some sort of data mining. Also typical roles, data analyst, business analyst, as well as business consultant. Those are the 2 business-facing roles in analytics today. The middle, you'll see data engineering and data science. So we have a whole practice dedicated to our technical skill sets. And the data engineering and data science practice provides technical leadership and resources for, we call them data product squads, but effectively what they are groups of engineering talent and our data solutions, which you'll see in the next box, together building analytics methodologies and standard solutions for our client analytics and strategic analytics teams. So types of solutions they would build are segmentation pipelines, even standard reports, standard measurement methodologies for, let's say, promotions. Many different standards come out of these 2 groups, and then they manifest themselves and are used by the client strategic analytics groups. Typical roles, data engineer, data scientist. We also have DevOps engineers and machine learning engineers. So people who take data science code, so if you think about those models or any type of supervised or unsupervised machine learning methodologies, and turn that into production grade code. That's where the bulk of our PhDs live. All of them have Python skills. The folks in data science also use R. On the data solution side, this is where we productize and figure out, okay, well, what are the right analytics solutions we should be building? They manage things like go-to-market strategy, the marketing collateral. If I go back to that segmentation example that I was talking about prior to this, they would be responsible for determining what would we price that at, how would we price that, as well as what would be the types of methodologies we would want to invest in. Right? So an example would be K-means, but let's say we wanted to do something with entity embedding and some sort of neural net. That would be a decision that they would help business case. And then lastly, analytics operations. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this is where we really get into the financial management of analytics as well as benefits realization. So they have to understand all of the work that we do prior to this. So what the models that we build, as well as the methodologies we use and the process for actually going about solving those problems. So you saw Chris DM earlier. We use the same methodology for a lot of our problems. And the analytics operations team, their responsibility is to make sure that we have good process, and we're making sure that we're getting the right financial oversight on any of these projects that we're working on. So if those are the roles, what do we look for? And so what I wanted to do was kind of abstract away some of the key technical components, because all of them require different sets of technical components, from client analytics to data engineering and data science. But when we thought about the three key skill groups, foundational, technical, and then soft skills, I kind of wanted to center around these three, only because as you think about your students and the skill sets that they're bringing and the things that you're focusing on, these are areas that you probably also want to ensure that you're paying adequate attention to. Foundational skills, we consider these table stakes for our client and strategic analytics teams, which are those teams on the far left, and those would be the types of people who take business analytics usually go into those two areas. But that's things like descriptive statistics and hypothesis testing, basic SQL, as well as the ability to do some data mining. And then obviously business communication, be able to communicate with the business your findings and your results. That second area of skills, the technical skills. So understanding of goodness of fit metrics, assumption testing, and application of statistical methods. This is usually what we test for. And the proficiency here ranges. It really depends on the specific role, the specific client, and the types of work that we think they're going to get. But this is an area that we also believe we can teach. And then lastly is soft skills, and this is the problem-solving framework. So, as we talked about Chris at the end earlier, but also learning agility and attention to detail. One of the things, and as we talk through the process for solving these problems and the problem-solving frameworks, one of the places where we see new grads struggling is in this place where we think about attention to detail. And then all of these skills and soft skills are graded on a competency matrix, and we have a standard set of questions as well as a case study, like a panel interview, to actually go through them. Just to give you some examples really quickly on foundational skills, so descriptive statistics, hypothesis testing. These are some of the questions that we would ask. How to set up and run a hypothesis test, how to visualize certain types of data, basic SQL and data mining. Can you find the outliers in the data sets? Sometimes we talk about missing values and imputation. And then lastly, business communication, which is probably one of the most important skills in this, in the foundational skill sets. On the technical skills front, like I had mentioned earlier, these goodness of fit metrics. So usually these come out during the panel interview, where we give the students a data set to take home, and then they come back with a recommendation. And so usually in the methodology that they've used, we usually specify a set of methodologies they can use and get them to choose. So if it's a customer segmentation problem or a promotions analysis problem. And so we actually then ensure that, specifically if it's a regression, if they're testing assumptions, or if the data violates any of those assumptions, and then how does that impact the conclusion of the analysis? And then a question we normally like to ask during interviews is the method or model right for this problem? Is there anything else that you would recommend? Usually that tends to, especially when we think about new grads, because they don't have a fulsome toolkit, or they don't have the experience and they haven't seen these problems very frequently. Sometimes we ask them things mostly around goodness of fit metrics instead of skewing towards the application. And then the last bucket is the soft skills, problem-solving frameworks. So how to get to the root problem a client is facing, how to determine the right tool, is there a way to repurpose a current solution? And the last two, learning agility and attention to detail. With learning agility, because our field, and I've been in the analytics field for over 10 years, something like 12 or 13 years now, and we've seen it change so much and evolve so much that having learning agility, or the ability to demonstrate the ability to quickly learn and apply new methods and models tends to be very valuable. One of the ways we do that and we assess that is we actually give a methodology during the case for the student to use. It'll be a standard methodology that's out there that we've tweaked for our own purposes. And then we ask them to, part of that is to communicate with us why we've made those changes to that method in a non-technical manner. And then the last one, and as I mentioned, I kind of touched on this earlier, this is table stakes for us, because in a business where numbers, specifically the outcome when it comes to tactical analytics, so like let's say a marketing campaign or a CRM campaign is so important, having that attention to detail is crucial. Some of the work in our strategic analytics group, where we're looking for directions, right? So if I think about more, how you should structure a CRM strategy or a marketing strategy, we usually don't go to a high level of precision. But in day-to-day business, and specifically in client analytics and running a business with analytics, attention to detail is a must. And then final thoughts. So I kind of went through that pretty quickly, but I know we wanted to give some time to ask questions at the end. But basically, client analytics are in high demand. So the two areas that I mentioned on the left, and those are the areas that students taking business analytics courses usually end up going into: client analytics or strategic analytics. Technical skills required, focus on the application and use. So with us, it's not about the level of complexity of the modeling or the algorithm, but it's really about the use case. Can you tell us what are the use cases and how they actually, what are some of the pros and cons of using that? Only because that's usually what our clients are asking us for as well. And that's how we determine what's the right methodology for them. And then the last bucket there is soft skills required. Really, when we talk about learning agility, that's where this comes into play. So we also look for candidates with a longer term potential with us. And so ensuring that they can evolve and grow as the field of analytics grows is one of the things that we look for when selecting candidates. And now I'm going to turn it back to Laura.
Francis, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I see in the chat here there's quite a few questions. So this is part of that segment on the agenda where we're going to open up a panel discussion with all of our guest speakers today. So if you do have any questions, again, please put them into the chat, and we will respond to them. So if anyone wants to kickstart, also too, I'm going to turn this segment over to my colleague Mark, who again is our product manager. He will lead the panel discussion.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you, Alison, Kevin, Janet, Leida, Sanjiv, and Francis for your presentations today. As Laura said, my name is Mark Raskowiak, and I am the Portfolio Manager for Quantitative Titles at McGraw Hill, Canada. We have some questions that have come through, which I will pose to the panelists. And if there are more, we'll try to address them in the 20 minutes that we've set off for this part of the webinar. So the first here is, what kind of background do students need for this text?
So I will take on this question. My name is Sanjiv, Jaggia, and as you know, I'm one of the authors. So when we wrote this book, our thinking was that students will have taken a course in business statistics before they start using this book. That said, in one of the slides that we showed, we we also say that this book is applicable to somebody who wants to teach business statistics with a little analytics flavor. I can tell you a little bit from my experience. I teach here, I teach a bunch of courses, but one of the courses I teach is an MBA course called Quantitative Analysis. Traditionally, this course has been taught as a statistics course. You know, as in most MBA programs, we have engineers with outstanding quantitative training. We have people from statistics, from economics and finance, again, with very good quantitative training in the program. Then we also get students in architecture, from architecture. I mean, they are really bright, but I don't think they've done much numbers before. We get students from philosophy, from English. So it was always a challenge, and trying to start with basic statistics, basic mean, variance, standard deviation kind of stuff, but then kind of race to regression, because at the end of the day, that's what MBAs need. I mean, not only do they need basic visualization and summary statistics information, they should also be able to run some regressions and interpret the results. So last year, when I taught that course, challenging as it always has been, I thought, why don't I just give it a little analytic angle? And so when I was doing descriptive statistics, I added a lot more visualization tools. And these students, especially the ones who were not trained so well in quantitative methods before, they loved it. And interestingly, because of this whole thing about storytelling and bringing in, when you're talking about regression, bringing in some cross validation, when you're talking about logistic, bringing in accuracy rates, somehow, even though I was concerned, but I thought I got my best evaluations ever that quarter when I thought I made the course a lot more advanced. So yeah, even though we do expect some background in statistics, but I have been able to be successful in my course as the first course for some of my MBA students.
Okay. Second question here, which is related. Is this text appropriate for undergraduate or graduate courses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in our slides, we had that. I think one of the slides talked about that. I can tell you about Cal Poly, where three of the authors are professors at Cal Poly. And so we teach it at the undergraduate level, which is a course in business analytics that Kevin talked about. He and Leida both teach that course at Cal Poly. And I teach, I just said, the MBA course, where I use this book. And then Leida also teaches a graduate level course in data mining, where he also uses this book. But for the more advanced MS business analytics students, he supplements the book with some added readings. So yeah, it depends on how you use it, but there is room to use it both at the undergraduate level and the graduate level. And I think Janet said something similar. She uses that in her undergraduate course for minors in business analytics, and also teaches that in the MBA program.
Yes, that's right. I teach it both for my undergraduate business data analytics minors, and I teach it with our MBA students.
Third question has to do with technology. So will R overwhelm students who have not studied coding languages before?
I feel like taking that question again. So R. So frankly speaking, all of us, the author team, did not use R 4 years ago. We all have some degree of coding experience, but we did not use R. And a couple of years ago, I brought in R in my course, and there was hesitation on my part, I think, and there was definite hesitation on the part of students. And I think that was in a sense that helped us add details to our book. So when we were writing this book, I was aware of that hesitation on my part as an instructor and on the part of the students. So there's a lot of detail that we provide. It's not just putting a statement, to run a particular code, but it's also like, what exactly does it mean? Give students the option to play with other functions within it. And other thing that changed in the last 2 years, I would say, is the awareness. 3-4 years ago, even our students, when we said, are you interested in business analytics? Are you interested in data analytics? There was not a whole lot of enthusiasm. And to be honest with you, that was also the case with faculty, some of the faculty, not all. Much has changed. So the awareness has changed, and some of the details that we have provided on R has changed. And last quarter, when I taught the same course, even though I do that with Excel, and then somewhere in the middle of the course, I switched to R, and then for the remaining part of the course, I was using both Excel and R. So many of the students told me how much they really loved R. In fact, so many of the students stopped using Excel from somewhere in the middle to the between middle and the end of the course. And so, yeah, that's really heartening. And I'm really tempted to use R basically from day one next year when I teach the same course. And again, I want to make it very clear that this is not a coding course in R. You don't need real serious coding that you can do with R to use the toolkit that we want students to be able to use in these courses. These are the use of standard packages that have been developed. So it's literally not any more difficult than using Excel. And frankly speaking, for me and many of my students, it's so much easier than Excel.
And I can chime in here as well. This is Kevin Lertwachara. So I teach undergraduate course on business analytics for business majors. And when students come to my class, they feel a little bit nervous about having to code in R. But very quickly, as soon as we go through chapter 2, and I give them options to use Excel or to use R, and they very quickly realize that, like what you saw in the video clips that I share with you, writing code or statements in R are not that complicated. It's not much more complicated than from writing a lengthy function in Excel. And by the end of the quarter, like similar to what Sanjiv mentioned, some students chose to do all their work in R and R Studio, and they don't use Excel anymore by the end of the quarter.
I've even found that in my classes, my students will get so excited about R that they'll actually go out and they'll learn more advanced code. And usually, especially with my MBA students, I start it and I offer them Excel and R. And I ask them, do it in Excel if that makes you comfortable, but then check your work in R. And usually by the end of the class, nobody's using Excel anymore. They've all really gotten into R, even though they all approach it with apprehension. And I even had some getting into doing fairly complex visualizations using packages like ggplot, which I don't even touch, but they really got into it. They got really excited about using R, and they took it to all kinds of new and interesting places. And that was really cool to see as an instructor.
So there is a related question on the chat for Francis, and that is R and Python and what you look for in industry.
Yeah, I think for us, so question around Python overtaking R. I mean, in our practice, or at least in my practice, I made the decision that for any type of analytics, so anything that's going to be production grade, it has to be in Python, specifically PySpark, so distributed version Python. Our client analytics and strategic analytics groups A lot of them either come from a business background or some sort of commerce with a bit of technical background. So a lot of them have SQL. And so we normally allow them, we normally say for that group, SQL is a must, specifically Spark SQL, distributed version of SQL. For R, there are some people in our group who are using R, but we've moved away from it only because we want to kind of standardize on a language. For industries where you're doing a lot of ad hoc analysis, specifically ad hoc analytics or data mining, R is still pretty prevalent in our line of business because we have a technology platform as well. It makes sense for us to use Python because then we try and productionize all of our methodologies and models, and they go into our data pipeline.
We've had some questions that have come in regards to a culminating project for the in the textbook. So there's a question here on the chat. Do you have a final culminating project at the end of the text where students can integrate most of the context or concepts covered in the course?
Hello, this is Leida. I can speak to that. Yes, we do. In fact, during our presentation, I mentioned that there is a term-long project that we use for our business analytics class that takes students through the entire process of the CRISP-DM framework, starting from analyzing the business situation, coming up with business questions, all the way to presenting the final analytics results to the stakeholders. So we do have this project in our class, and I think it's a great learning experience for students because they get to apply what they learned, the concepts they learned from the class to an actual project. And it depends on how we run the class. The data set may come from real companies that we work with that are willing to share these data sets. When we don't have companies to work with, what we do is there is a publicly available data set, large data set that we often use for this project, which we can share with you. And all of this, the way we run the project and data set and the steps students go through, the things that they should focus on are described in detail in the teaching paper that we wrote. And after the webinar, I'll ask Laura to send the teaching paper to everybody so that you have a copy of it and you can read through it. And if you have any questions on the teaching paper or about the project, please feel free to reach out to any of us.
Mm-hmm. And like to add, sorry. Okay, I'd also like to add that in my MBA course here at Cal Poly, what I did last year is that I used one of the big data sets we have in the book. We have 6 of such data sets, and you can use them in so many different ways. So I introduced that pretty much on day 1. And I told them, right now, we are not doing anything about it, but just take a look at it. Look at the dictionary, the variable names and stuff like that, data dictionary. And then I talked about that by the end of the first week, and basically gave students 2 projects to work on from the same data set. And it has tons of variables. It's on sales reps data set, there it's information on both the software and hardware industry, on sales representatives, their personality type, their sex, their education level, their net promoter score, the kind of evaluation they have been receiving. It's like a very rich data set. So in the 3rd week of classes, they had to turn in their first project where they basically did visualization and summary measures and came up with some kind of a story. And towards the end of the course, they used the same data set, but now they did regression analysis with predictive analytics and again came up with a story. So yeah, I do use that within that course.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same data set because we have one of our colleagues in the management and HR department here who teaches in our graduate program, and she uses this sales reps data sets in her people analytics class. And I used the same data set when I was on a sabbatical leave in Europe. I was teaching a bootcamp course for MBA students. It's a short course, but I was able to use this big data set as a final project for students to work on, in addition to the paper and the large data set that Leida mentioned earlier.
So we have another question on the chat that I know has been answered there, but I thought we might bring it up here, and it is related to data sets. It is, does the text come with any messy data?
Yes, so I just had this conversation with my undergraduate students just yesterday. So we have a number of data sets with missing data, and sometimes students have to do subsetting or look for complete cases before they can start analyzing the data. And this is one of the reasons why we have one chapter dedicated to data wrangling that is positioned earlier or early in the textbook, so that students have this skill before they can think about what modeling techniques they use and what type of analysis that they could do. So we have a number of data sets included in the textbook where students have to do data cleaning and data wrangling ahead of time.
I would also like to add that while that of course is true, but we also made a decision about a year and a half ago that we didn't want to make the data too dirty either. So like in real world data, sometimes you can spend quite a bit of time just cleaning that up. So we chose an area right in the middle. So it's not a typical clean data that you find in textbooks. At the same time, it's not the kind of data that you find totally in the real world. It's somewhere in the middle. In fact, we took the real world data and we removed some of the things, we cleaned up some of the stuff, but still gave room for a lot of data preparation, as Kevin said, and dealing with outliers and things like that. So it's somewhere in the middle.
Okay, I will take one last question since I know that we're hitting up against our hour and a half. And this question is, it seems the book has a significant component of business statistics. Does it mean to replace it, I guess assuming business statistics, or supplement it?
I can take on that question again. I think it's still a supplement. It could be used to replace that course, but given the current state of affairs, in the US and Canada, I'm sure maybe this is what it will be a few years later. So it's a little hard to answer it. So we wrote it as a supplement, but we also know that some people are using it as a replacement. I'll have my other author team and Janet to chime in as well.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that we wrote this book in order to support a wide range of courses, because we are aware that people are teaching business statistics and business analytics very differently from each other. So there was a purposeful decision to include enough statistics topics in the book to support all kinds of courses that people teach, so that they can adopt the book in the way that they like.
Okay, I will pass this back to Laura.
Thank you, everyone. That was a really great panel discussion. I just wanted to, before we end this webinar, I wanted to make a note that there will be a follow-up email to everyone who did attend and who had conflicting schedules and wasn't able to attend. In that email, I'll definitely be including the author team's teaching paper. There'll be a post-event survey, a recording of this webinar. So if you have any colleagues who are also teaching business analytics that you'd like to pass this along to, please feel free to. We'll also be sending out a link for you to request a review copy of our business analytics course, our textbook for your fall course as well. And of course, again, if you do have any questions, Jen, can I get you to pull up or just give me the presenter screen one more time? I'd like to just make sure that you have a copy of my email before we leave. So if you do have any questions, please do. Just trying to pull it up here.
You are now presenter.
Thanks, Jen. There we go. It should be coming up. Sorry. So please do take my email down. Do feel free to send me any follow-up questions. I'll be sure to any of our panelists today to get back to you with any questions that you might have that's further. So again, I just want to thank our attendees for taking time out of their day to listen to this really great webinar on how to take your business analytics course online. And also a really big special thank you to our panelists, our author team, Janet, our digital faculty consultant, and Francis, our industry expert, on really bringing the customer journey of what business analytics looks like today and how it's going to move as we go forward. So again, thank you. If you have any questions, please reach out and be well.